the pick for the 49ers was it felt like three guys, just based on, what the reporting was and what you and I were hearing from people who were hearing stuff from people. And it sounded like Mykel Williams, Walter Nolan, and Kelvin Banks were kind of the three guys that they had circled. And Mykel Williams falls to them at 11. I want to put a pin in John Lynch saying they tried to trade up for him.
Sure.
Which is kind of insane. I want to put a pin in that for a moment. But overall thoughts on Mykel Williams?
I think, look, when we started talking about the edge rushers in this class, particularly the SEC guys, we sort of looked at it like there isn't really one that stands out just purely from like a production standpoint when you talk about the guys from Georgia. And I think Mykel Williams sort of embodied that. And then as time went on and you got to know the context of why he wasn't ultra productive at Georgia, and you heard people talk about what they thought he would have looked like had he not been playing through a high ankle sprain, and even how well he played despite dealing with a high ankle sprain. It's like, okay, like this all makes sense. It is a team captain on a blue blood program, championship caliber program, a great defense, a well-coached defense. It's a premium position. The size, the length, the physical attributes are all there. It sounds like all of the character traits you want in a potential building block are all there. So yeah, are there questions about what type of pass rusher he's going to become? Sure. But I think if there weren't questions about the pass rusher he would become, he would have been a top 3 pick. So, and I think there were some smart people who believe that he would have been maybe a top 5 type prospect in this draft class had he not dealt with the ankle injury, because that's a type of ceiling he has. So I think in terms of fit, pedigree, physical attributes, character, I think he checks all of those boxes potentially. Now, does that necessarily mean he's going to be an all-pro and a star type guy who you could count on for 12 sacks a year? I don't know that, but is the floor really high? It seems like the floor is really high, and at least you're going to get somebody who can start and maybe play at a pretty reasonable level right away as a rookie, which I think is a pretty high bar. And if it works out and he is a Pro Bowl type player, then it's obviously a great pick. And I think there's a pretty reasonable, I don't think there's an unreasonable chance that he becomes a high quality edge player opposite Nick Bosa. He's already good in the running game, which is a good place to start. And if he can become more of a pass rusher, or more nuanced pass rusher, I think that's obviously what the 49ers are banking on. And that will help them get back to, the championship level defense that they had when they could really bother the quarterback with multiple pass rushing options, even outside of Nick Bosa.
I think you mentioned his floor, and I think that's the thing that jumps out the most to me is I don't think there's a high likelihood that he's going to just be unplayable. Where it's, second week of camp and he's running with the third team because he just can't figure it out. I don't, that would be the disaster, right? Like that's what you need to avoid. San Francisco doesn't necessarily need an all-pro across from Nick Bosa. It'd be nice, but can he set the edge against the run, and can he give you 5.5 sacks in year one? I think that'd be really, really productive, and it helps. And the thing that when you kind of look around the board and what happened later in the first round and what happened immediately before and after the 49ers pick, I didn't think there was some massive swing and miss here. Yeah. It wasn't like they drafted Matthew Golden, right? The receiver from Texas, where you're going like, wait, what are they doing? Right. So they took a good player who I think a lot of teams probably picking at 11 would have been happy to take Mykel Williams at 11. It sounded like reporting going into round 1, there were a lot of teams who were happy to take Mykel Williams before number 11. So like I said, if his floor is really good run defender and he's going to get you a handful of sacks a year, Like he'd take that and hope that he starts reaching a ceiling where it's, it looks more like a Pro Bowler.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively safe bet. I mean, and ultimately that's what you're doing when you're drafting all these players. You're making a bet, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're betting on a limited amount of information, because you don't know what he's going to look like going into his NFL career, a year or 2 or 3 down the road. You're just betting on what you think it's going to be. But you really like every scouting report you read and people you talk to, it's like the traits are absolutely there, right? He's got the 34 and 3/8 inch arms. He's got the wingspan. He's 6'5" and 267. He could be potentially a 3-down edge defender, which is not, that's not D Ford. He's not just a speed guy who you only play in certain situations. This is somebody who could be like Nick Bosa and potentially play all 3 downs, and play a lot of snaps for you. That's an incredibly valuable player, and arguably, the second most valuable player on a team, just in terms of positional value, right? So there's no quibble there in terms of positional value. There's no quibble in terms of where he's playing. He's played against the best competition. He's played in a bunch of big games. He's played on elite defenses. He's a team captain. Like, those are all boxes that he's checking. Did he get you 10 sacks a year at Georgia? No, he didn't. And can you potentially explain that with the ankle injury? I think the 49ers are hoping that you can. But I think at worst, you're getting a starting defensive end, potential 3-down guy who can set the edge in the run game and at least has the traits to develop into a double-digit sack type player. Will he get there? That's ultimately the biggest question. But, I think the fact that there are those questions are the reason, again, why the 11th player taken and not a top 5 player. Because I think if he did have double-digit sacks in multiple seasons at Georgia, there's no way he would have even been there at 11. So I like the pick. I have no problem with the pick. The fact that Kyle Shanahan was essentially beaming in his press conference indicated that he's like in love with the pick. So that, to me, all those factors to me have me liking the pick. I'm pretty confident he's going to end up being a good player, but I'm not like, if I were a Niner fan, I would feel really good about the pick. I think it's probably one of the best case scenarios they could have had, but I don't know that he's like some surefire superstar. I think he could be a good player for multiple contracts, but I just don't know if he's going to be an all-pro or not.
I think one of the things that jumps out to me is that he's still only 20. Yeah. And then his freshman year, I was looking at some of his Pro Football Focus stuff. His career high in pressures came as a freshman. He had 33. He also had 6 sacks, which ended up being his career high that year. And that it's the difference between, I know athletically he's not Shamar Stewart, the Texas A&M defensive end, who I think went to Cincinnati, 19th overall. Yeah. But the Shamar Stewart thing was, wow, he checks all these physical boxes, but we're not really sure if he can play football. Like it just like, he gets it. He doesn't, like 4.5 sacks in 3 years is a problem. Like that says something. With Mykel Williams, he checks all those same boxes. And again, he's not the same athlete, but he checks all those same physical boxes. And then you see the production to go along with it. And it's not elite production, but enough that you like the upside. Where it's a lot less of a guess. Like, to me, his floor is so much higher than a player like Shamar Stewart. So I think it bodes well for the rest of the draft. Not to spin this too far forward, but I think it bodes well for the rest of the draft that the 49ers are approaching this. At least it looks like based on the Mykel Williams pick, they're approaching this like, all right, who can contribute now? So for the rest of this draft, I think that might be a theme of less, hey, what's this guy's ceiling? If everything goes right, can this guy be, an all-pro? And more, okay, you might eschew the ceiling a little bit, but Walter Nolan is a player we talked a lot about. I think Walter Nolan has a super high ceiling, but I also think Walter Nolan's floor is like below Javon Kinlaw's. So there's a massive, massive risk there, and maybe a bigger reward. I I think we're going to see through the rest of the draft the 49ers make picks like this where it's not somebody where you're going, oh, that's crazy high ceiling, all pro potential, and more, oh, that guy's going to contribute now. Mykel Williams, I think, is going to start. And if they take a linebacker, it's probably going to be a linebacker who you feel good about starting. And that should, I think, be a theme in this year's draft for the Niners.
Yeah, and I mean, what's interesting about what you just said specifically is like, yeah, he feels like he can play right now, but as you also mentioned, he's also just 20. He turns 21 in July. Like he turns
June.
21 right. Is it
June 29th?
Oh, June 29th.
June 29th.
Sorry.
Yeah,
reading is hard.
Yeah.
He's able to play now, but he's also super young. So if you believe that he has a lot of improvement to make just by developing in the league, then you're super high on him. Like the downside is like, I don't know. What's the downside? Is he Cleveland Ferrell? Like, is that the worst case scenario? Is that, not including injuries, knocking on wood here, but like and Cleveland Ferrell was a decent player for the Niners who was, they actually felt his loss pretty substantially. Yeah. Obviously not a star player, but somebody who could set the edge and at least, play credible snaps along your defensive line. Like that's the worst case scenario. That's not an all-time blunder if he's a guy who starts for you and eats a bunch of snaps. While the upside is, I think he has all pro type upside. I don't know if we'll get there, but I think it wouldn't be crazy to me if in 2 years it's like, oh yeah, Niners are looking at paying this guy $30 million a year at some point. Like that wouldn't blow my mind.
Okay. I think I'd be a little surprised by that. I got the ick from watching him, man. I get the fit with the Niners and stuff, but I'd be pretty surprised if he winds up being an all-pro.
Yeah, I didn't love what he did this last year, but going back and watching his first 2 seasons and then like realizing that he was playing on a high ankle sprain, to even be out there at all playing on a high ankle sprain, I think is commendable to a certain extent.
Got that dog in him.
Yeah, we'll see. And there's also the element, John Lynch talked about this too, that he didn't play a lot of wide nine at Georgia. And the 49ers think that him playing in a wide nine will unlock him a little bit more because he'll be attacking tackles from a different angle. He'll have more space to work with, potentially more runway to try different moves and stuff like that, instead of playing, along the tackle's inside shoulder and the 4-eye, which was the thing he did. So, yeah, like I'm going to trust the 49ers on this one a little bit. And just the fact that like, if he did have the production that we would expect him to have based on his first 2 seasons and the traits, that he might have been, a top 3, a top 5 pick.
Sure.
So, him sliding to 11 to me indicates that there's a strong belief within the Niners and probably other NFL circles that this dude like still has that ceiling.
Yeah.
I think if there's, if there's criticism and if we look back at this in the next 2 to 5 years and say, man, that wasn't a great pick, it's probably going to be because some guys, like you mentioned, Walter Nolan or maybe Ken Grant, who went 13, who I was really high on, or Jalen Walker, even with the Falcons. Like if any of those guys end up popping and being substantially better than Mykel Williams, then it'll be like, all right, maybe it wasn't great. I think Jalen Walker is going to be a star. I'm like super high on him. The idea that like, oh, where does he play is being like a knock. That's kind of like, it's kind of like the Draymond Green thing. It's like, oh, he's too, he's too small to be a big man, but he's too like big to be a wing. Like, well, actually that's like the whole point is like he can do a little bit of everything. I think Jalen Walker is going to be really good. I thought he would have fit well just as an edge defender for the Niners. And if he was better than your linebackers, then okay, he could be a linebacker in base down. He can be a Sam or a Will in base down with Fred Warner. Like that would have been fine. And I think Kenneth Grant, I just think he's he's ascending. He's a freak athlete. He's 330 pounds. If he ends up being, I don't know, Dexter Lawrence or Fletcher Cox or some version of that, I wouldn't really be surprised. I thought he would have made a bunch of sense for the 49ers. But I do think there's depth potentially in the second and third round for a defensive tackle. But really, to me, like, I think the most likely scenario, like I said, if we look back at this Mykel Williams pick and kind of cringe a little bit and go, it wasn't the best, it's going to be because of the guys they passed on. Kenneth Grant, if Walter Nolan pops, if Shamar Stewart pops. I don't think Shamar Stewart's going to pop. I think he's the classic,
if there's
like, go ahead.
If there's defensive linemen who are better than Mykel Williams.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't shock me.
But like the ones like drafted right around him specifically.
Yeah.
Like if they're second and third round guys, it's like whatever, that happens.
Yeah, sure.
But like those guys like really Ken Grant specifically, and we'll see what they do. I expect the Niners honestly to draft maybe even 2 more defensive linemen in on day 2. I think they're going to go super heavy along the defensive line.
I'm manifesting Donovan Ezeraku at 43. Just double up on edge. Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me. A lot of tackles though.
Yep.
A lot of tackles.
Can I give a day 2 prediction before we get out of here?
Yeah.
I think they're going to trade back from 43.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at my buddy Patrick Kahn put a list up at Touchdown Wire of the best available players on day 2, and it's like Will Johnson, a cornerback, Mike Green, your guy, the edge rusher from Marshall, Donovan Ezeraku, an edge rusher. I would love for the 49ers to take him. I don't think they're going to. A cornerback, Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina, Shador Sanders, of course, Luther Burden, a wide receiver, Nick Emenwari, a safety, Landon Jackson, an edge rusher. These are all the top 8. Trey Amos, number 9, a cornerback, number 10, Travion Henderson, a running back. There are so many freaking good players left at positions that maybe the 49ers are not chomping at the bit to go get. And if they can move back a couple of spots, still land a really good defensive tackle, and pick up maybe a third round pick or another 4th to do so, that wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Yeah. I think, I mean, they're guys like I agree with all that. I definitely think that's a real possibility. I think my prediction for day 2 would be they draft a 3 technique and a nose tackle. So I think a 3 technique like Shamar Turner from Texas A&M or TJ Sanders from South Carolina. One of those guys. I know our guy Nick likes Darius Alexander from Toledo, who I haven't watched much yet, but he's a second or third round type guy. Those are all 3 techniques that seem like they would be good values in the second round potentially. And then somebody like Alfred Collins from Texas, who's 6'5",
just a unit,
6'5", 330, like run stuffer,
and he moves. Yeah.
Like I think a guy like that, like if they came away with the first 2 days in the draft, and I don't know what order they would take these guys in, but if they came away with Mykel Williams and say, Darius Alexander and Alfred Collins the first 2 days of the draft, you'd be like, all right, I guess I understand the mass exodus along the defensive line in free agency. Like that would be pretty justifiable if that's how it turned out.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. And I think too, there's a real chance that after the draft is over, they wind up adding additional free agents to kind of supplement some of the holes on their roster, which is why I think they can afford to do that. They can just if there's 3 defensive linemen they like on day 2 and early in day 3, I'd go for it because you can supplement the rest of the roster other ways.
Yeah. You lose 3 starters along the defensive line. and 3 of your first 4 picks are along the defensive line, all in the first 2 days, I think you're potentially in a good place as long as as you can coach these dudes up. And we can talk about that maybe after the draft, the Chris Kosuric conversation, because I do think it's more of a mixed bag than maybe is consensus. But we'll talk about that, particularly if they end up taking more defensive linemen. But yeah, man, I think it's
That's
good.
all I got.
Yeah,
I do too.
All right, I appreciate you staying up late night, road game in the hotel room, mic issues, rocking with the AirPods. Not ideal.
Yeah, sorry
scenarios.
if I sound like shit, everyone.
No, you sound fine. It's
my
very...
travel microphone. I don't know if it's the mic or the cord. Just doesn't read it. So it's cool.
Listen,
it's fun.
Adversity builds character. You're like Mykel Williams playing on a high ankle sprain right now.
That's exactly how I feel.
Just the podcasting traits are all still there. It's just not quite the same on the tape.
The production's just not there. Yeah, no, for sure. I've often called myself a high floor, low ceiling guy. So,
well,
all right, I'm going to go to sleep now.
Yeah. All right. Good night.
Thanks,
we will have plenty more draft content coming. So keep it locked. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Bye.